So Jack and I make up the air photo interpretation team. We're part of the Environment Service at Norfolk County Council. We've been working in, or the team in various forms has been working in Norfolk and also in Suffolk some of the time for about 25 years. Just in case anyone needs to know, Norfolk's that bit that's sort of sticking out into the North Sea. For the most part, we're externally funded. The bulk of that funding has come from Historic England over the years. Some of it has come from National Lottery Heritage Funds. And most of the time, we've been working on these comprehensive, large-scale, extensive surveys. And that's pretty much coverage in Norfolk to date. All our records and mapping go into the local historic environment record, which is the county database of archaeological sites. And the mapping's available. You can get it from the HERs, or you can look at it on Historic England's various websites and explorers. And it looks like that in old school colours. So we've always worked with volunteers in one way or another. We have close working relationships with other teams within Norfolk County Council. So our data gets used by metal detectorists or community archaeology groups. We ran various sort of workshops at various points and events for people. But we've really focused on it a lot more in the last sort of 9 to 10 years. In 2015, we were invited to develop a project as part of the Water, Mills and Marshes Landscape Partnership. So that's National Lottery Heritage Funds, so very large partnership projects. And that was taking place in the Broads, which is the pink area over to the east, sort of between Norwich and Great Yarmouth. So the Broads is a really interesting landscape. It's made up, it's a really complex mix of different landscapes. There is marshland, so that's a former estuary, which has been sort of closed off since Great Yarmouth Sandspit developed. So you've got this big area of flat marshland. You've got sort of almost islands close to the coast. You've got river valleys, and then you've got the uplands as well. Within the valleys, you have these large areas of open water, which are known as the Broads. For the most part, these were created during large-scale peat extraction in the medieval period. So we covered that area with the Historic England, as it was then, National Mapping Programme project. We completed that in 2007. Since then, these new sources have come. So at that point, back when we did that work, we weren't using Google Earth and we weren't using lidar data. The July 2006 Google Earth layer for that part of Norfolk for the uplands is particularly productive. These were all crop marks that hadn't been recorded prior to us going back and doing some more work there. We've obviously got some ring ditches, which are probably Bronze Age barrow mounds and sort of remnants of fairly early field systems. And the lidar had also not been used for that area. This is the sort of iconic site of St Benet's Abbey, which is a monastic site on a sort of island of slightly higher ground within the marshes. So we had to develop a methodology for this project. At around the time I was writing the proposal, I saw a paper by Professor Stuart Ainsworth about a project that he'd been running in the Pennines called Altogether Archaeology. And they've been giving volunteers 1 kilometre square areas of lidar data for them to look at. They were providing them with some basic training, and then they were going away with this data and seeing what they could find. So we thought we could do something similar for the Broads. So we basically divided up the landscape partnership area into 1 kilometre grid. And within that, I did a quick scan of the sources to sort of look for priority areas where volunteers were likely to be able to find stuff. That means there's a bias towards the uplands because the Google Earth was so productive, but we did try to sample all different types of landscape. We planned to hold sort of lots of in-person workshops, but COVID happened, so we couldn't do any of that. We moved everything online. So the volunteers got a 2-hour, very rapid induction into how to look at lidar and aerial photographs, what they might need to, what they're going to be trying to spot, what sort of archaeology they might see, how crop marks form. So we had to cover everything from the basics through to how this actual project was going to work, how the methodology was working. So it was a real crash course. So once they'd signed up, what we did was then, once they'd registered as a volunteer, they got sent a source pack with the different sources we wanted them to use. They got sources to mark up with what they found. They got a manual which outlined the methodology and gave them various hints, and also lots of links to areas where they could look for sort of further resources. So links to how to use Google Earth Pro if they actually wanted to go on and do that, how to work with lidar if they wanted to do their own visualizations. And we also did online catch-ups, so they could come and sort of talk about what they found or see what other people had found and ask questions. We ended up training 62 individuals. We didn't collect a lot of personal information from them because of GDPR, but they did include sort of students as well as the sort of more middle-aged and retired volunteers who tend to make up the bulk of these sorts of projects. Of the 62 people we trained, 26 went on to register as a volunteer and 17 managed to complete at least one grid square. One person went on to complete 9, and she was our star volunteer. So the Broads was our testing ground, but since then we've rolled the methodology out across other parts of Norfolk. The little purple squares are the later prehistoric Norfolk project, who we've done some work with, but it's mainly been a kind of consulting supported role. It's not been a project we're running ourselves, so we're not going to talk so much about that. The one we are finishing at the moment is the Wendling Beck and Fransham project, which is the green block in the middle. So the green area is a brand new aerial investigation and mapping survey funded by Historic England and completed by Jack and myself. The pink area, we're going back to an area that had an NMP project completed before Google Earth and lidar again. And we're also doing our new project is the one in the top left-hand corner, where again we're doing an aerial investigation and mapping survey and also a volunteer area in pink again. So for both Wendling and for Northwest Norfolk, we've been able to offer in-person training as well as offering online training to those who prefer that. It looks as though I'd sort of colour coordinated these. I didn't. That one was in autumn, and I think people are obviously wearing warm colours because it's getting cold, and the one at the top was in the summer and everyone's in blue. So, yeah. But they're really popular. They're really good fun doing the workshops. They're a kind of full day. They get to do presentations and hands-on activities. But otherwise, they can do the online one where it's the crash course again. So the methodology is really, really straightforward. It's really simple. Hello. It's really simple, it's really lo-fi, I do everything myself. I just create these 1 kilometre grid square sources, so they get sent a variety of lidar, and they also get at least one Google Earth extract. It's slightly varying from project to project, depending on what's going to be most useful. We give them an OS map with the older mapping on it, and they get an OS first edition map if we've got one. For more recently, I've been giving them this larger, wider area of lidar because I think it's quite hard interpreting features, particularly really extensive features, if you can only see 1 kilometre of them. And they also get the manual. And then this is what I get back. So they're just using Paint 3D or something like that. They draw blobs around things they can see, or they can sketch it. They give it a number, it gets entered into the record sheet, and then I use that to give quite detailed feedback about everything that they've found. So I'm just going to hand over to Jack, who's going to talk about some of the things that we found.
Hi, I'll just do a quick run through of some of the features that have been found as part of the Broads project. So the Broads area covered 43 square kilometres, recorded 124 new sites and 65 amended sites. So this is one of the older sites that we found. We've got a potential Neolithic late Neolithic, I don't know if say it, late Neolithic to early Bronze Age henge feature. It could be a Bronze Age burial mound, but the size is around 50 metres. We also think there may be a potential entrance way on the eastern side of the feature. We've also got a few Bronze Age marine ditches, and we were also wondering whether the paler marks in the interior of the marine ditch may relate to a central mound. There's just a detail of the henge feature. What became clear as we went through the project area is a large amount of multi-period field systems. So on the right, we've got a large amount of boundaries and enclosures that tend to relate to the modern and post-medieval maps of boundaries. So we think they're more likely to be a medieval, post-medieval date. We do have some on the left-hand feature, but we also have a number of trackways and enclosures on different alignments that we may believe is of a potential Iron Age to Roman earlier date. What became evident as the project went on is that we were finding large amounts of potential Roman agricultural centres. So this is an example from Bayton. This was previously recorded as part of the board's NMP. This is defined. So I tend to look at the field. I'm surprised I haven't walked over there yet. So this is a large double-ditch rectilinear enclosure which may relate to a villa site, but rather than conventionally a villa site, that's sort of a high status. There's not very much evidence for sort of high status living accommodation. We think it's probably a large agricultural centre. This is a newly recorded site at Langley. Again, similarly to the Bayton examples, we've got a number of double-ditch rectilinear features. We've also got enclosures and field boundaries. Some of the features visible may relate, could potentially be medieval to post-medieval, and may relate to the 16th century hall that you can see down in the south of the image. This is another example from Strumshaw of another potential Roman Iron Age Roman settlement site. If a lot more investigation needs to be done on these sites, but if our interpretation is correct, what we're seeing is a sort of large-scale, populated, organised landscape in the boards during this period. We'll quickly move on to the medieval to post-medieval period. So this is at Langley Green, south of Langley Abbey. What we have recorded a number of new earthwork platforms that are visible on the lidar data. This is a continuation across the road, where we've got a number of field boundaries and enclosures that may, again, relate to medieval, post-medieval assessment. This is an example of medieval peat extraction, post-medieval peat extraction. So you can see the shallower features here as the stripping for the peat. These are probably post-medieval. A lot of the medieval peat extraction is flooded by this point. The peat extraction is often found in close proximity to parish boundaries, which also follow the river valleys. Quickly moving to the Wendling Beck area, which is the green area in the centre. That's a slightly smaller area covering 18 square kilometres. It recorded 27 new sites and 17 amended sites. The numbers the lower numbers were predictable given the heavier, denser soils of the project area. We're finding a lot more earthwork sites than crop-mark sites. This is an example of an enclosure and ring ditch at Longham. The ring ditch is probably a Bronze Age ground barrow. The enclosure is yet undated. It's about a kilometre south of the Roman road, and also in close proximity to another site with a similar formation of rectilinear enclosure with a barrow. This is an example of a large bank we think is part of a former park boundary. So at Gresson Hall, Gresson Hall is now condensed into a smaller 18th century park, and we think this is part of the remnants of the original boundaries. This is we found evidence of the common edge boundaries at Hove. So the commons were areas that were open access for people, uncultivated areas of land for people to raise animals as well as collect fuel. We also believe that that's the same boundary that you see quite nicely on the Braden's massive Norfolk. Just there. And I'll quickly hand back to Sophie to talk about the Norfolk.
So lastly, I was going to talk, sorry. Lastly, I was just going to talk very briefly about our most recent project. So that's the one in Northwest Norfolk. As in the boards, with the volunteer area covers sort of 47 square kilometres, but we're only anticipating doing about 30 within that area. And we do give volunteers the choice, so if they want to do a particular grid square, they can. The Northwest Norfolk's a very different kind of landscape again. We're in the Good Sands region of Norfolk, so it's very light, thin soils that can be improved by the addition of marl, so chalky material from the fields. The crop marks are quite tricky in Northwest Norfolk, I have to say. We launched the project in spring and we ran in-person and online workshops, and we coincided those with the digging season for the Sedgeford Historical and Archaeological Research Project, which is a very long-running community project in the area. So it meant that their volunteers and students could come on our workshops. For the first time, we ran an orientation meeting as well for established volunteers. So we've been really lucky. So we've had volunteers who've worked on all of the projects we've been running. So some of them have done all four. And so they've been gradually building their experience up. But we did find when we moved to central Norfolk, they had real trouble getting their eyes in on a very different geology, different types of archaeology. And so we ran a little meeting for them and just showed them some of the things that they might be expecting to see in Northwest Norfolk and some of the things that they wanted to avoid recording. Envelope pattern is everywhere on the lidar. So that was one of the main things we needed to teach them about, so they weren't recording it in every field. You can still see the archaeology underneath. Here at Sedgeford, we've got a nice sort of little barrow cemetery, which had been previously recorded as ring ditches. But we can see that there's actually mounds surviving within some of those ring ditches, and there's another little mound that hasn't been recorded at all. We've only just sent the source packs out, so I haven't had any results back yet, but I suspect a lot of it's going to be these long field boundaries that Matt was talking about that they've had in Cambridgeshire, some of which may be furlong boundaries, so remnants of medieval field systems. That seems to be dominating, particularly the lidar data. What I would say is the benefits have been going back and looking at a new area. We're not doing any mapping, we're just sort of adding records onto the HDR. It's been really productive. So our most productive area has been the board so far, but there we had 3 new sites for every square kilometre we covered. So that's on top of what was originally recorded by the NMP survey. And alongside that, we had about 1.5 amendments for every kilometre square as well. The volunteers have been really engaged. They've really enjoyed it. It's a really nice way of engaging them with the sources. They actually get their hands on really quickly and actually start using them. It's a real learning process for them, but they do get better the more square kilometres they do, the more feedback they have. They improve their knowledge and they improve their ability to discriminate between different types of feature. The benefits for us have been all this new information that we wouldn't otherwise have had a chance to gather. But also it's really great being in a teaching and mentoring position, because you really start questioning what you're doing yourself. You really question your own methodologies, your own way of kind of skimming across sources and how you discriminate between different features. And the volunteers really question why you think something. So you have to give them a really good explanation about why the blob on the lidar that you don't think is archaeology. You have to explain in succinctly but well why you think that or why it is. So that's been a lot of the benefits for us. Thank you.